Probably one of the more iconic box arts featured in video stores through the late 80s, The Video Dead is a horror film with light comedy elements that takes the zombie movie back to its roots of mysticism and the supernatural. I first heard of this one when I got back into VHS collecting in the 2010s, where, in UK VHS circles at least, it was regarded as hipster wank fodder. In essence, the UK video box art was just kind of iconic, and it wasn't exactly rare at the time, so every man and his dog who was embracing retro chic back then would usually snap this one up and parade it around as a trophy. Much to the annoyance of the actual balding VHS enthusiasts who didn't rate the film and were annoyed that people were getting joy out of a £20 big box post-cert when they should only feel joy after dropping £140 on a Section 1 video nasty. In either case, the film built up a bit of a reputation for itself as being entertainingly awful, with the box art being the only thing going for it really. Indeed, I first watched this one a few years ago, and while I didn't hate it, I wasn't exactly an enthusiast. But that was nearly 4 years ago now, and I haven't watched it since, and I decided, given it's Zombie Month over here on the channel, to give this one a retrial and see if maybe, just maybe, this thing could win me over. So the film starts with something of a prelude as we're introduced to a famous writer called Jordan. He's seemingly on the skids at the minute, living in a house where the trash is piling up and it's unclear whether he's actively in work or not. Jordan doesn't seem happy, and things are about to get a whole lot worse for him when an appliance company called Highlight appear at his door with a large crate. Jordan says he hasn't ordered anything, but the delivery drivers are adamant that the package definitely says it's to be delivered at Jordan's address and that it's fully paid for. So, reluctantly, he accepts it. On getting it indoors, he pops the sides off to reveal that it's a television, a somewhat beat-up, run-down television. He's not impressed. He doesn't even really watch TV. In either case, he plugs it in, boots it up, and some old-timey zombie movie called Zombie Blood Nightmare is playing on it. He leaves the TV on and heads over to begin his writing, only the shrill screams and noise from the TV are proving to be a distraction. So he eventually goes to turn it off. Only, on turning it off, it automatically turns back on. He tries again, the same thing happens. Eventually he unplugs the set from the wall and begins to head back to the typewriter, when it turns on again. Jordan eventually heads to bed, not noticing that the TV is on, and once all is quiet, a zombie shuffles up to the screen and a strange electric pulse emits from the set. Jordan's fast asleep by this point, as the TV falls to the ground and several zombies climb out of the set and begin shuffling around the house. The next day, the delivery men are on their way back up to Jordan's house, as there in fact has been a mistake and the TV was supposed to be delivered to a specialist research centre for the occult. The guys sheepishly knock on the door, but get no response. Eventually, they nudge the door open and find Jordan hanging from the ceiling, totally unresponsive. With that, we cut to black and 3 months go by. When we pick up, it's revealed that Jordan is dead and we're introduced to one of our main characters for the film, Zoe, who's parked up outside her new home, Jordan's house. In the 3 months since the incident, Jordan's house was put on the market and Zoe's parents, who are stationed in Saudi Arabia but are imminently due to return to the US, bought the house with the aim of setting it up as their new residence and settling down with the kids. And Zoe's agreed to pick up the keys, assist the movers and begin to get the place ready ahead of the grand reunion. On getting into the house, it isn't long before we're introduced to another member of the family, her brother Jeff. Jeff's a bit more of a rebel-rouser than Zoe, but the pair both agree to help. So, they settle in for the night and catch up on what's been going on in their lives for the last few months. The next day, Jeff's woken up by the doorbell. On answering, a quite desperate Texan is there to greet him. This is Joshua Daniels, and he's travelled for hours from Texas to the address provided by the delivery company looking to try and get the TV back. Jeff doesn't know anything about the TV though, and he thinks that Joshua's basically just a crazy person, and after listening to him rabbit on about how dangerous this TV is, and how if he finds it he shouldn't do anything with it, Jeff, half listening, basically tells him to sod off and shuts the door in his face, before telling Zoe about the weirdo who just knocked on. But it turns out the TV is in fact still in the house, in the attic. And later that day the TV switches on and a mysterious woman beckons Jeff to come and get the TV and bring it downstairs. Something Jeff subliminally does, Before the day's out, Jeff's introduced to his next-door neighbour, April, and her dog, Chocolate. The pair seem to hit it off. Really hit it off. We're in smoochy time territory, when disaster strikes, as while being distracted, Chocolate manages to get off his leash and head off into the woods. And that's bad, because Chocolate likes to try and breed with the skunks, and when he tries, the skunks spray him, but the smell just turns him on even more. So, Jeff and April head into the woods to try and find the dog, only they aren't alone. As it's revealed, the zombies who escaped from the TV last time have been hiding out in the woods, waiting for the right victims to come along to help keep them going. And when one of the zombies finds Chocolate, well, it's curtains for the poor pup. April and Jeff eventually find Chocolate, and he's sadly no longer with us. April's upset, but even more horrified that she's going to have to explain to her parents that their dog's dead. Jeff reassures her, and they both try to concoct a story to explain Chocolate's untimely demise, settling on some random guy basically murdered him. Later that night, Jeff calls April to check on how things are going, and she basically reveals that she told her folks that some guy named Jeff killed Chocolate. And while they're super upset, she doesn't think they'll connect the Jeff with the killer Jeff. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't press charges. Jeff's just relieved it's all sorted and plans to meet up with April the next day. That night, however, after smoking some weed, strange things start to happen. Jeff takes the TV into his bedroom to watch the zombie movie, and a mysterious woman appears on the screen again, begging Jeff to make love to her. The signal cuts out, but when it pops back in, she's in Jeff's room, and with the tug of the sash on her robe, she's also fully naked. Things start getting a bit heated. But as quick as it starts, the woman zaps herself back into the TV and begins mocking Jeff, but not before another mysterious stranger comes up behind her and slits her throat. This man introduces himself as the Garbage Man, and basically tells Jeff that evil lives in his TV, and that if he knows what's good for him, he'll take the TV down to the basement, put a mirror in front of the screen, and forget it ever existed. Jeff dumps his weed that night, but the next day he does as instructed. But while trying to duct tape the mirror to the screen, a zombie's hand pops out and tries to pull Jeff into the TV. Jeff manages to sever the hand, and on taping the mirror to the screen, the dials and vents of the TV begin to bleed. From here, the action shifts a bit, as we instead follow the escaped zombies as they arrive in Jeff's neighbourhood. They prowl the streets before eventually wandering into a random home where they begin to wreck up the place and kill the inhabitants. It's April's parents. And April almost got killed too had she not left for school some 5 to 10 minutes before the zombies wandered in. They then head over to the next house over, which is an old couple chatting and cooking coconut fudge. The zombies also dispatch them. When April gets back from school, she walks into a bloodbath and pandemonium kicks off, with the police, ambulance services and more searching the house and surrounding area for the suspects or any clues as to who or what did this. Jeff rushes over to April's house, comforts her and brings her back to their house for the night to get her out of that terrible situation. But on getting back to their place, things go from bad to worse, as shortly after getting back there's another knock at the door and Joshua Daniels is back, this time fully aware of the murders that have happened, who basically asks Jeff if he's willing to listen now. And Jeff pretty much is. Zoe and April are skeptical, but Joshua begins to fill them in on what he knows about what he calls the video dead. He explains that some time ago he picked up that TV from a yard sale, but almost immediately he realised something wasn't quite right with it. It plays with your mind, it distorts reality and releases the most terrible evils. Joshua explains that the creatures from the TV killed his wife and nearly killed him, but he managed to get a mirror over the screen and get it crated up to be sent to an institute for the occult. But unfortunately the deliveries got mixed up and it wound up here. And while Joshua was explaining all of this, the zombies are slowly massing outside. Zoe's immediately dismissive of Joshua's story. April isn't entirely convinced either, but Jeff is willing to accept what Joshua said. The pair continue to chat while April heads upstairs to grab a bath and to try and put the night behind her. However, shortly after getting ready, a zombie bursts in, causing her to faint, and then it picks her up and carries her out of the house and into the woods, with Joshua and Jeff catching sight of the incident right as the zombies disappearing into the darkness of the woods. Jeff's adamant that they should go and get her back right now, but Joshua tells him that they need to hang back as the night gives them good coverage and they need to get a good plan in place to end things once and for all. And with that, they begin to set their plan in motion. Jeff and Zoe cover all the external doors of the house with mirrors, and Joshua reveals that there are only two things that can kill the zombies. They either need to be trapped somewhere that they can't escape from, which causes them to turn a bit feral and basically eat themselves until they die, or they have to be made to believe that they're alive, which in turn makes them believe that they can be killed, or re-killed. So they die for real when you say shoot them in the head or something. The pair are skeptical, but everyone heads to bed, and when dawn strikes, Jeff and Joshua head out into the woods to settle things once and for all. In a pedestrian third act finale, will Joshua put the TV to rest? Will April and Jeff finally get it together? And that bride zombie is just darling in that wig. Wow! All this and more will be answered if you check out the video Dead. And the fascinating thing about this film is that it isn't complex, it isn't original, it isn't trying to set a new standard for zombie movies, but despite it feeling so very, very generic, it goes down incredibly easily. Like, this is probably one of the easiest to watch movies I've covered in a long time. It knows what it wants to be, and what it wants to be is a fairly cheap and cheerful run-around zombie movie that's here to have a few laughs and deliver a few scares, and while I think if that's all you're looking for, you'll probably have a good time, it's not a film without its faults. For starters, the script is a bit scattershot. On the one hand, the plot itself is at least fairly straightforward, as long as you don't think about it too much. I think that's kind of the key for this film, just go with whatever the characters decide to do in the moment, because the second you put more thought into their actions, the whole thing starts to unravel quite quickly. Examples including Jeff meeting Joshua for the first time and being warned about an evil TV set, only moments later for Jeff to conveniently find an abandoned TV set in the house and to not think anything at all about full-on using it, how the zombies managed to get in and out of the house is largely put down to magic, but you're telling me that April collapsing and being carried out of the house by a decaying, stumbling and heavy-breathing zombie went completely unheard by anyone in the house, and even Joseph's big plan to get rid of the zombies once and for all are all examples of moments in the film where the suspension of disbelief becomes just a little too hard to really handle. There are moments as well where the film almost tricks you into thinking it's going to be more involved than it actually is. The introduction towards the end of the first act of the garbage man and the witchy-looking woman really imply that this TV is way more than just a portal both to and from a zombie movie. It gives the implication that Jeff and Zoe are going to be fighting mystics, psychos, zombies, the whole shebang. But then after that one scene with these two characters, they both disappear and we never hear anything about other channels or what else the TV can muster up other than zombies. Which was very disheartening as they set it up to be this whole multi-layer thing only to pull the rug out from under you in revealing that it is in fact just a flat linear narrative. Made all the more tragic when I found out that there was a sequel proposed for this film that never got made. I figured, oh, okay, so they were maybe going for anthology vibes, but no, the proposed sequel was going to have someone find the TV and get pulled into the zombie movie rather than the zombies breaking out. It's not a bad idea, but it's not exactly aspiring. Beyond that though, the plot's fun enough, it has a very mild but good sense of humour about itself, I cracked a smile a few times, and the horror elements, while quite tame, are still kind of fun in a Goosebumps Are You Afraid of the Dark kind of way. It's a shame in many regards that they didn't lean into the humour just a tiny bit more, as the amount they end up doing makes it feel almost accidental for the most part. It's enough that you can't not acknowledge it, but not enough really to put it up there with, say, Return of the Living Dead or Shaun of the Dead in terms of zombie comedies. The act structuring is pretty solid, with the first act keeping a good pace, getting the cast established and pre-setting up the menace for the film. The transition to the second act is seamless and it maintains the pace pretty nicely, ramping things up just enough to keep things interesting and making the humour a bit more prominent. Unfortunately, the transition to the third act and the third act itself right up until the end is where the film really does kinda come unstuck. Because the moment that Joseph explains his plan and Jeff agrees to help him, the whole film grinds to a very abrupt halt, and only really seems to splutter here and there from then on until the end. The third act essentially turns into two very big runarounds, with runaround A being Joseph and Jeff in the woods hunting zombies very slowly, and runaround B having Zoe face off against the zombies herself, but again replace running around the woods for quickly walking around a house, and you're basically there. It all leads to an ending that I felt was kind of underwhelming. Not so much that it killed my enthusiasm for the film, but enough that it kind of neutralised the goodwill that I had in the first 2 acts. It's the reason I say that this film goes down pretty easy, because you only really need to be paying attention for the first 20 to 25 minutes, and then after that, you can pretty much dip in and out of the film and still catch most of the key beats. In that regard, it does make it more likely that I'll revisit this film in future, because I'm always looking for stuff to have on in the background that I can watch while doing other things, and this is about as digestible as they come. The characters are all pretty flat profile-wise, they all get a tiny bit of backstory, nothing to give them any kind of complexity, but just a bit more than the barest minimum. In particular, April suffers the most here, because she's literally just shown to be the neighbour and possibly a love interest for Jeff, right up until her family are killed, and even then her entire profile is girl from next door who may be into Jeff, has a dead dog and now dead parents. The fact that she technically is a main character in this and that's her entire profile is kinda wild to me. Only beaten by the fact that Joseph, a bit part character, ends up having the biggest and most complex backstory. He has nuance and a full character arc, where none of the main cast gets one. I couldn't tell you anything about what Zoe and Jeff were doing before they got the keys to this house, I couldn't tell you anything about April's folks or Jeff's folks, but I could give you a detailed breakdown of what Joseph had been up to for the last month or two, what drives him, what scares him, and what adversities he'd faced. In some ways it feels almost like the film started as a Joseph movie and then pivoted abruptly into whatever this is. The dialogue is as cheesy as they come, it's dry and hammy all the way, flat deliveries, dialogues that don't match the actor's performance, inconsistent character pieces, it's an absolute mess. But in a way, I kinda love it for that. It's kinda funny really that the 60s B-movie zombie film featured in the main film is a stereotypical lampooning of 60s horror, while this film in and of itself feels almost like a dry parody of 80s horror. I mean, I won't say the lines here are good, but when tied into the easily digestible plot and strange character choices, it definitely had a charm to it that kept me watching right up until the end credits. The script was written and directed by Robert Scott. Robert's really more of an AD or second unit lead than a sole director-writer. In the AD world, he has 20 credits, mainly for TV, including episodes of House, Heroes, and Beverly Hills 90210. As a writer, he has 1 credit, this film, and as a director he has 2 credits, this film and a movie called Rat Dog that came out in 1990. As mentioned, he did plan for a sequel to come out that was essentially the reverse of this film. A guy gets trapped in a zombie movie and has until the end credits to figure out how to get out. But when he went to the studio who funded this film asking for a budget to make the sequel, they offered him the same amount as they did for the first film, which he wasn't happy about to begin with, so the film just never got made. Of course, there's always still time, so hopefully the Video Dead 2 Zombie Blood Nightmare will be hitting screens sooner rather than later. On the direction front, well, I don't really have much to say really. It's a more than acceptable, if not slightly basic, take on the zombie movie. Robert clearly knows what he's doing, he works well with the crew to deliver a vision that isn't so much distinct, but is definitely noteworthy as a solid attempt at a genre that has so many failures. There's clear and concise colour usage here, in particular blues and greens seem to get a lot of playtime. What surprised me is, supposedly the original intention of this film was to keep it purposefully tame on blood, guts and gore. And it was only when the distributors caught an early edit of the film that they decided it needed more gore. So they gave Robert some extra funding to go and do some reshoots to insert more gore and blood into the film, and that's kinda cool really, because all the way through this it felt very much like a young adult horror flick. Something your folks may be comfortable sending the early teens to go and see. If anything, the gore seems a little rushed and inconsistent. I'm not 100% certain if I'd prefer to have seen this film without it. Same goes for cast direction. While I have my thoughts on the performers here, Roberts clearly worked closely with them to try and get a distinct vibe reminiscent of those mid-60s horror flicks. And I think he's largely succeeded. Again, I don't think they reinvent the wheel here, but what they do is clearly thought out. The cast seem to have been given a lot of free rein to work with set spaces and props. It's all pretty solid. On the cine front, again, it's solid. Maybe a tad basic, but good. shots are pretty well composed, the line and rule of thirds in framing are observed pretty consistently, there's at least some B-roll to help let the sequences breathe, though regular viewers will know I'm a sucker for B-roll and this thing probably would have benefited from just a little bit more. There's some nice attempts at experimentation, particularly with coloured lighting gels, which does help to bring a bit more life to the production over the more commonplace and functional cine that runs through most of the rest of this production. It's solid, but with room for improvement. The practical effects run the gauntlet between genuinely impressive even to this day and a bit rickety. The zombie makeup in particular, I feel looks pretty good when the lighting is considered in chiaroscuro, but a lot of the time the zombies here are shot in broad daylight or in flat set lighting, and it really brings out the cracks and faults in the makeup. These zombies are better than most, but even so, the natural and flat lighting profile really does them no favours. The sequences work fine, as mentioned, more B-roll probably would have helped, but on the whole these are well put together pieces. And the edit hangs the scenes together decently, with only a few falters across the whole runtime that I noticed. On the whole, I was impressed with this side of things. Again, the zombie genre has quite literally been done to re-death, so to see something just consistently get most of the elements in the right place was quite a relief for me. Performance-wise, it's a bit of a busted flush. Michael St. Michael's is probably the strongest performer in the whole thing, and he collectively has probably a paragraph of lines for the 10 to 15 minutes that he's in this film, and then he's gone. The calibre of the performance never really comes back from that. Sam David McClelland as Joseph Daniels is probably the second strongest performance here, but he's a bit hammy, a bit blustery, and while he gets the most complex character backstory, character arc, and some of the best lines in the film, he doesn't quite land the tone or physicality in places. Ultimately, he's the most fun and interesting of the folks we spend time with in this film, but I'd say he was just above good here. But as for Rocky Duvall, Roxanne Auguson, and Victoria Bastel as Jeff, Zoe, and April, it's B-movie-tastic. Flat, dry, and sometimes even bored, non-enunciated deliveries and a physical presence that screams, "I don't want to be here." They very rarely get a flicker of energy put into the scene, but for the most part it's just a very unenthralling experience on that front. This kind of movie requires a very specific level of energy, and they just don't quite find it until it's too late, really. And finally, the soundtrack. It's late 80s, hair-rocky, poppy fodder with some synthy horror elements thrown in for good measure. Does it sound stocky? Sure, but does it work for the film? It does, and I kinda liked it. The sound design for the movie within the movie was very in line with actual 60s productions. I think, on the whole, they did a really solid job on this front. The Video Dead never released in theatres in the UK. Instead, it got a direct-to-video release in November 1987 by Medusa Home Video. And after that, it hasn't been seen since. In the US, however, it did get a DVD and Blu-ray release courtesy of Scream Factory, who released the film fully remastered with extras including trailers and a commentary as part of a double feature pack, along with the wonderfully surreal and, in my opinion, better film, TerrorVision, which I really need to cover at some point on here. This was pretty much considered a value pack release and is still in print and going usually for between $15 and $25 depending on the time of year. And I think, for the lower end of that price, this is really a steal, and definitely worth your time. The Video Dead is a B-movie picture, make no mistake. This isn't going to be the highlight of anyone's night. But what it lacks in wow factor, it makes up for in stability and enjoyability. It's absolutely a flawed production, but I could see this pairing up with maybe another zombie movie like The Dead Next Door or Return of the Living Dead tremendously well. I almost certainly will chuck this one back on in future, and if you can find it going cheap, I'd say pick it up.